Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, all good.
All right, great. Thanks, Daniel. And I'm going to share my screen. All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. I'm also going to share a link if I can with the chat. Daniel, I'm going to send it to you. But this is a way if you'd like to follow along with my talk in another language, you can go there and see it side by side in your browser window. So, hello, everybody. I'm Chris Lim, the founder of Theotech and the creator of Spiffio, an all-in-one platform for translation and accessibility, and working backwards from God's heart to unite all peoples and languages in Jesus Christ through the church. Our dream is for every church to be accessible in any language. And about a decade ago, missionaries from Wycliffe Bible translators spoke at my church describing the need to translate the Bible into the world's more than 6,000 languages. I was at the time a computer science student at the University of Washington in search of a summer internship. And although I naively thought majority language Bible translation would be sufficient to evangelize the world, I was very intrigued by the prospect of applying my passion for technology to advance the gospel. And when an opportunity arose to do research in machine translation as an undergraduate with Professor Katrin Kirchhoff, I applied and was graciously accepted. Through her mentorship, I learned the ins and outs of statistical machine translation, writing a paper on phrase table augmentation through domain adaptation, and eventually going on to work with Professor Oren Etzioni and Stephen Soderlin, building an interface for a panlingual lexical translation system that included humans in the loop by enabling people to do word sense disambiguation interactively. Through these experiences, I came to appreciate the values of keeping humans in the loop and giving people power to create, curate, and apply their own data. So today, I'm going to share a vision for a data flywheel for biblical machine translation. And although the field of machine translation has advanced from the statistical to the neural, these values for keeping humans in the loop and giving people power over their data are as relevant as ever. So why do Christian communities need to curate their own data sets for translation? And how can we empower them to do so at scale? If you talk to most people about translation, they will likely mention Google Translate, perhaps the most widely used machine translation engine in the world today. Through my work using Spiffio to help churches make their services accessible in many languages, I discovered a peculiar drift in the automatic translations generated when going from English to Indonesian. Several years ago, the English word worship would be translated into the Indonesian word ibadah, which is appropriate for Christian worship services. But at some point in time, Google retrained its engine on more Islamic content, resulting in the word sholat being chosen more often, a word that refers to Muslim prayer. And as I wrote in an article for the nonprofit AI and Faith, this example illustrates why faith communities of all kinds need more control over their language and terminology when using AI. Without access to the inner workings of MT algorithms and the underlying data sets, without being able to customize AI for their needs, faith communities will have a more difficult time benefiting from the AI-driven digital transformation that is touching all of society. This example applies not only to machine translation, but also to speech recognition, question answering, text summarization, and more. Without biblical domain training data, we cannot develop biblically literate AI. And the people most qualified to produce such training data are the communities of people who would use it themselves. Which leads me to the second question. How can we empower Christian communities to curate and apply their own data at scale? The answer I'd like to offer is a data flywheel for biblical machine translation. A flywheel is a virtuous cycle where any input you add reinforces the rest of the cycle, resulting in compounding momentum. In this diagram, we begin with translation data, which lets us train more useful machine translation models, which increases our ability to automate translation for more content and more types of content, which results in greater usage of those translations, which enables us to collect more data, and so on and so forth. And the outcome? Accelerated growth, which would mean more biblical content accessible in more languages, more of the Bible translated into more languages, and more churches, including people from many languages, reflecting the diversity of the body of Christ as a witness to the gospel. So let's get more specific. As an example of how we've sought to implement this vision, I'd like to share my experience building Spiffio, a platform that helps churches translate their gatherings using humans and AI. The primary elements of our AI stack are automatic speech recognition, machine translation, and speech synthesis. Every Sunday, a pastor prepares a message and uploads the script to Spiffio. And when they preach their sermon, they can release the lines as they speak, which are then automatically translated into the languages requested by people in the congregation. Before the pandemic, people would receive the translation on their smartphones, where they could also hear it spoken in their language. And during the pandemic, we integrated with Zoom, StreamYard, YouTube, OBS, and other services so that churches could show translation in their live streams and video calls, or embed Spiffio's audience view in their own web pages so people can receive translation while participating in the service virtually. And if a church posts their services on YouTube, they can download the multilingual transcript of the sermon as a subtitle file that makes their YouTube video accessible in other languages as well. So that's the basic setup. And if the pastor wishes to go off script, they can use speech recognition with autopilot to translate their words. And if desired, they can have a human in the loop by having someone correct the transcript in real time to produce more accurate translations. In addition to live speech and scripts, Spiffio supports translating slides and documents. It also transcribes and translates audio and video files. Churches that have bilingual members can ask volunteers to review and correct the automatically generated translations before they're released during worship service to ensure the highest level of quality. And these reviewed translations, along with auto replacements, are used to adapt machine translation to the specific domain used by that church. This means less work for volunteers over time, as the automatic translations are fine-tuned to the terminology and context of that community. So how could this approach help with Bible translation? In nations where low resource languages are spoken, using a platform like Spiffio to translate weekly sermons, with humans creating or correcting translations, naturally results in a useful data set over time. What if we could partner with churches on the frontiers to translate their sermons into the languages of unreached people groups? For example, if 10 churches translated a 300-sentence sermon each week, after the first year, they would have a data set with 156,000 sentences, which is enough to bootstrap a machine translation model for low-resource languages. And this community-sourced translation approach means that the training data is created by the people for the people who will benefit from it. I ran this idea by one of my friends in Bible translation, and she mentioned to me a few challenges with this approach. One was that in cases of closely related languages, we may have people who think they understand and can translate, only to discover from native speakers of a language that they are misusing cognates. Another was that the translations that may be created or edited may not be idiomatic, resulting in automatic translations that sound like another language, trying to express itself in the local language. And a third was the lack of standard accepted orthography by a people group. Ironically, she mentioned that the best source of textual data for the language she worked with was probably WhatsApp conversations. And I think her feedback illustrates 2 points. The first is that machine translation cannot replace the work of linguists. We need the human element to do in-depth interviews, document languages, clarify ambiguities, develop orthographies, and much more. And the second is that language is being used in all sorts of mediums. And in order to make that data useful for translation, we need to provide a platform that spans many use cases. So this is the second leg of the flywheel utility, increasing what people can do with their data and the use cases they can apply it to. In addition to a sermon or a lecture, Spiffio also provides a translation portal for community source translation, and it's been used by a major Christian publication to continuously translate their articles to multiple languages through a network of supporters. Spiffio supports multilingual Zoom calls that's been used by a major Christian nonprofit to connect their global workforce so team members can learn from one another and share knowledge in their native language. And it's also been used for hybrid multilingual meetings that give regional church bodies a way to include all of the languages represented in their area for their regular meetings. And there's many more. So I'd like to close with the opportunities I see on each leg of the data flywheel. The first is open data or data sharing. Much like technology has rapidly advanced with the advent of open source code, Christians can accelerate translation of biblical content by sharing their data. As more people and organizations create translations for their own use and share the training data with the broader community, machine translation algorithms can automate more and more of the work for future content and experiences. So could your organization benefit from a domain adapted model trained with data created by and for like-minded peers? What if you could leverage data generated from Christian publications to increase the availability of linguistic and Christian training materials in the gateway languages needed for the Bible translation? Or what if your church had a local language content you are already producing and want to amplify the impact by using it to accelerate the translation of other Christian materials? That is the data flywheel at work, amplifying the impact of the translation work you're already doing and benefiting from the work of others in the kingdom. The second opportunity is with utility. Are there use cases for translation that we can add support for in the platform? Are there new interactions like chatbots or hybrid conversations? Is there better tooling we can build for including humans in the loop? Or maybe are there algorithms you're inventing that you'd like to make useful for the wider community in a productionized platform? Some open challenges that we're facing include multilingual speech recognition, real-time speaker diarization, real-time long audio alignment, real-time updates to ASR language models, and genre detection so we can select the best machine translation engine for the job. Maybe there's a way that we can partner on these things. And the third opportunity in the flywheel is usage. Are there ways we can serve you? Are there ways we can help accelerate your projects? Maybe we can make some of our capabilities available via API, or maybe there's a way we can provide translation for your content and events, or maybe there's some other deeper partnership. Just let us know. Let's spin this data flywheel together. Our dream, of course, isn't for Spiffio to be ultimately at the center of this flywheel, but Christ. We are but one part of the kingdom ecosystem sustained by the Holy Spirit so that one day God's vision of people from every nation, tribe, and language worshiping God together will be fulfilled. So thank you for listening. If you'd like to connect with me, I've shared several links on this slide. And I also wanted to mention that as the host of the Theotech podcast, if you would like to share your work combining technology and the gospel, I would be interested in helping you do so on the show. Thank you.